Hey, my name is Fred the Finch. You might know me as Ronald. I'm one of the best Yamato players in the game right now, and I'm also one of the best players when it comes to parrying. Deadlock has one of the most interesting melee systems in any game I've ever played, and this is almost purely because of the parry system. In most games, melees are relegated to just finishing off characters when you're low on ammo or they're low on health in your close range, but in Deadlock, meleeing can be one of your main sources of damage, and it can become super powerful, but it can also be super punishing. Just to quickly go over the basics, in Deadlock, you have a light melee and you have a heavy melee. Heavy melees do a little bit less than twice as much damage as a light melee, but they are much more telegraphed and a lot easier to parry. In contrast, light melees do a little bit less damage, but you have to parry them by prediction, so they're a lot safer. If you do get parried, you get stunned for 1.5 seconds, and while you're stunned, you take 1.3 times extra melee damage. This 1.5 seconds is just enough time to get off two heavy melees of your own to do a ton of damage to them while they're stunned. However, if they have something like debuff reducer, debuff remover, or silencer, then they won't be stunned long enough for you to get two heavy melees off, and they will be able to parry the second one. So always be wary of that. For the rest of this video, I'm going to be going through the most common habits that I've seen and the most exploitable things that I have seen people do. These aren't 100% effective, but they should make your parrying a lot more consistent, and you should be a lot less susceptible to being meleeed. One thing to note before we get into this is that every player has their own habits. While a lot of players have similar habits and a lot of people will do the same thing, and this is especially true when they play the same character, each person is different and you have to learn their habits. And also, when you parry somebody, they might change their habits in order to switch it up. So just because this works one time doesn't mean it's going to work the next time, and it doesn't mean it's going to work against everybody. So that's just something to keep in mind that while other people adapt to you, you also adapt to them. So you just have to grow faster than the other person so you're always ahead. The first thing we're going to go through is just the most common habits that people have on every character. And then after that, we're going to go through more character specific things. One of the most common melee habits that most people have in this game is that when they're trying to finish somebody off, if you get low, they're probably going to melee you. This is most common if they have to reload, but if you're low, they're likely going to run at you and try to melee you. This parry is kind of a last ditch effort where if you don't parry them, you're almost definitely going to lose the fight anyway. So if you're about to die and they're close to you, just throw out a parry. You never know. And if you're on the other side and you're getting somebody low, and the only way you lose the fight is if you get parried, don't punch them. Even if you have to wait on your reload, it's not worth it. Another common habit that often works in conjunction with this one, oftentimes, as soon as they get up from being parried, they're going to punch you again. So something I often do is I'll parry them, punch them twice, and then just parry again. And they get stun locked for 3 full seconds, and they take extra melee damage. When you're in a 1v1, you can almost always get your 2 punches off. But when there's 2 enemies, something that'll often happen is you parry one person, then the other person will come in and try and punch you. So something I like to do is parry the first person, punch them once, and then parry the second person, and then I can punch them once. By the time you've punched the second person, the first person is getting up. And like we said, once they get up, a lot of the time they're going to punch you again. So you can parry, punch the first person, parry the second person, punch the second person. As the first person gets up, you parry again, and then you can punch them again. This almost never works again, but for those 3 parries, it's pretty consistent. Those habits got a little bit more complex as we kept going, but a lot of these habits are still just very simple and really easy to exploit. For example, in lane, a lot of people like to spam heavy melees a lot, and something that people do a lot of the time is they'll jump down from the bridge and then heavy melee from behind you. This is when audio cues are especially important. You can just listen for that heavy melee and then parry them and kill them at minute 1, and this means you essentially already won your lane. Another time that audio cues become increasingly important is when you're chasing somebody and they go around the corner. Oftentimes, if they run around the corner, then as soon as you come around, they're going to be heavy meleeing you. So once again, just listen for that audio cue, parry them, and get another free kill. One thing a lot of people forget about is that you can parry people even when they're not trying to melee you. As long as they're using their melee, you can parry them. One of the most common times you can do this is in lane. A lot of people will try to punch minions that they can't be denied the soul. And when they go for that melee, if you dash in and then parry on the minion, you can just parry them in lane and get another free kill. Another time this can be super useful is against one of the most common movement techs in all of Deadlock. Something a lot of people will do is wall bounce and then heavy melee to mantle up onto a ledge. If you're standing on that ledge as they go for it, you can simply parry on that and they'll get stunned. Another common thing that people tend to do is if you show them that you're meleeing, so if you melee them or you even melee in front of them, a lot of the time they'll like remember that they can melee and then start meleeing you. Something that's also important in the laning phase is the fact that you can parry guardians. When you get close to a guardian, it'll punch you, and if you parry that, it'll stun it for a little bit. So when you're tower diving, you should jump up past the guardian, parry it, and then go and kill the person. If you just run past the guardian, it's going to punch you and it's going to beam you while you're trying to kill him. But if you parry it, it stuns it for a little bit, and you don't take any of the melee damage. One thing that becomes a little bit less prevalent as time goes on is just the fact that people are kind of unaware of the parry cooldown. So if you miss a parry, a lot of the time people are going to start spamming their melees at you, but they don't actually know when the parry comes back up. So if you just look for the little parry icon, then you can see when you have your parry up, and a lot of the time they'll just keep punching you and you can parry them. Also, since parries get reset on a successful parry, because you can parry minions and guardians, a lot of the time, if you go for a parry and you miss the person, but you accidentally parry the minion, it actually resets your cooldown. And because they don't realize that, they'll start spamming their melees on you, and you can parry that. A small thing that can be a telltale sign of somebody who's looking to melee you more is just that they're buying melee items. This is, once again, especially prevalent in lane. If you see that they have like melee lifesteal spirit strike, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be meleeing as soon as they get there. So even if it's just a light melee, you can be predicting that a lot easier because of those items. The last thing I want to talk about in this section is taking mid boss. When you're contesting mid boss, you should always parry first. Unless you have something like Bunny or anything that completely stuns all of them, you should parry on the rejuve and then punch. Sometimes even parrying twice just to make sure that they don't have anybody to punch it is worth it as well. That wraps up the more general melee habits. So now we're just going to be going through each character, and I'll talk about each habit that I've seen either as or against that character. Starting with Abrams, the most common habits are obviously just meleeing after their charge and after their ult. Abrams has a guaranteed melee after he pins you into a wall, but if you buy something like debuff reducer, debuff remover, or silencer, then you do have enough debuff resist to actually parry him out of that. So as long as he doesn't have duration extender, then you can parry him. There's also a quite niche counter to Abrams' pin. If you're standing right up against the wall when he goes for the pin, if you press your parry before the pin actually hits you, then if he goes for the heavy melee or even a light melee, you'll parry him. Once again, this is pretty niche, and you have to be standing right up against the wall, and you also have to time it really well. But you don't need debuff reducer, and it even counters a light melee. This interaction works like this because parry doesn't actually get interrupted by stuns. So any of these stuns that you see, if you parry before it, as long as they're punching right after it, you can stun them. This is only really relevant against a few characters, but when it is relevant, it can be super helpful. And even if he does have duration extender, if you have debuff remover, you can still parry it. And as far as his ult goes, it depends on where he lands. If he lands directly on top of you, he does have a guaranteed melee. But if you land on the outer edge of the circle, then you can parry him before he gets to you. And once again, if you have these debuff resist items, then you can parry him always. Another nasty little habit that Abrams players have is if they pin you into nothing, as in they don't stun you on any wall, they'll still often melee you. So if you see him winding up that melee, you can parry it. Also, in general, Abrams players are going to be a little bit more melee happy, so just be more ready to parry when you're against them. If you're playing as Abrams, something to watch out for is after pinning someone, they might just light melee you back. So when I get pinned by Abrams, he'll punch me once, and then I'll just light melee him back and run away. And so if you're playing Abrams, you can watch out for that and parry them on that hit. Going against Bebop, you can actually hide your light and heavy melees in your uppercut animation. So if you see that you're taking melee damage when he hooks you, he might be meleeing you during his animation. So you can try parrying during that. This will stop any follow-up that he has, and so you'll basically get away for free after a hook. Also, specifically in lane, before Bebop has his uppercut, oftentimes if you get hooked, they're gonna melee you. So if you get hooked before he has 1.5k souls, a lot of the time it's worth to just instantly parry. And playing as Bebop, many times people will melee you while you're in your ult. So if you see that somebody's about to heavy melee you while you're ulting, you can just cancel it and parry them. Calico's another one of those characters that's gonna be more melee happy, so you just need to be more ready for her. But something that a lot of Calicos will put into their combo is a light melee right after their 2. Oftentimes when they dash in with their 2, they're gonna hide a light melee during that animation. So while you can't parry the 2, you can parry the light melee right after it, so it's definitely worth to look for that. I wouldn't do that every time, but if you see that they're meleeing during their combo, then you can. And as Calico, a lot of people might try to melee you out of your ult. So as soon as your ult ends, a lot of the time if you parry, you get a free kill. And you're going to see something like that a lot, where as soon as your invincibility frames end, people are going to try to melee you. This doesn't only happen on Calico, it happens on a ton of characters, and I'm going to keep bringing it up. But I'll try not to waste too much time going into depth on every one of them. Against Dynamo, one of the melees I see talked about the least is right after his black hole. If he black holes you and you live, a lot of the time they're just gonna light melee right after that. So when I get black holed, I just press parry as soon as I'm out, and a lot of the time I get him. A lot of the time, other people are also gonna be meleeing you while you're getting black holed, and if they have poor timing, then they might be heavy meleeing you as it ends, and you can also parry them. And as Dynamo, once again, when you quantum entanglement and you get those invincibility frames, people are going to try to melee you out of that. Talon, I don't really have any tricks for, but something that is often true is while he's ulting, he's like invincible to melees for some reason. This is kind of an inconsistent bug, but if he's casting his ult, be wary of that and maybe don't melee him. I don't have any melee tips against Haze, but as Haze, if you sleep somebody and then you go for the heavy melee, a lot of the time people are going to light melee you out of that, just like the Abrams pin. So it could be good to parry right after you punch. And then during your ult, a lot of people are going to punch you. So if you're dying in your ult, then you can once again cancel it and parry. And this is once again something that's going to be very common is if you have like a long casting ability, then people are going to try to punch you during it and you can just cancel it and parry it. So like with the invincibility ones, I'm just going to go over those quickly and try to not waste too much time on them. Against Holiday, this is one of the cases where they might not be trying to melee you, but they are using their melee. In order to make her barrels fly faster and explode instantly, she has to melee them into the ground. So if she's right next to you and she sets off a barrel, if you parry, then when she tries to punch that barrel, she'll get parried. Against Infernus, oftentimes they'll punch you right after they stun you with their ult. And if you're on the outer circle of the ult, you have debuff reducer, you have items like that, then you can parry this a lot of the time. And then as Infernus, oftentimes people will punch you during your flame dash. So if you see that they're doing that, then you can cancel your flame dash and parry them. And this is especially prevalent in lane. Against Ivy, one of the most common melees that they'll go for is a heavy melee after their stone form. And I believe this is guaranteed if they have the extra stun duration. But if they don't have it, it's not. So if they're doing it in lane, you can parry them. And if it's mid to late game, if you have those debuff items, you can parry them. Against Kelvin, they'll oftentimes melee you during their ult, especially at the start of the game. So it's definitely worth to look out for that. And then as Kelvin, people will try to melee you both in your ult and while you're ice beaming. So just another cancel. Geist doesn't really have many unique habits when it comes to meleeing, so nothing specific to look out for. Lash players will often melee you after they slam you, and this is almost only a thing really at the start of games in lane. Against McGinnis, if she has her max wall, then she can stun you with the wall and then punch you, and this is a guaranteed melee unless you have the debuff items. And then as McGinnis, a lot of people will punch you during your ult. This is another cast cancel thing. Against Mirage, Some Mirages will try to punch you after they tornado you. This is once again especially prevalent in lane, but it's not as common as it used to be. Against Mo and Krill, a lot of the time, whenever they use their Scorn, they're gonna just go for a light melee in lane. So if you see them going for that, then be ready for it and parry it. And another super common thing that Mo players do is they'll punch right after their ult ends. This is just like the Dynamo one, where as soon as the ult ends, they'll just go for a little light melee to finish you off. So if you parry that, a lot of the time, you can get out of a really sticky situation. And then also like Dynamo, a lot of the time other people will be punching you while you're getting Mo ulted, and if they have poor timing, you can parry that. And as Mo, when you disarm people, oftentimes they're going to just go for the punch because they can't shoot you. So you should be ready for that if you're close when you disarm them. Against Paradox, some Paradox players will try to melee you after they use their carbine. This isn't a guaranteed melee, and you can parry this every time. I don't have anything specific against Pocket, but as Pocket, this is just another invincibility one where a lot of people will punch you as you come out of your suitcase. Against 7, oftentimes they're going to try to punch you after they put the stun on you. It's another one of those times when parry not being cancelled by stuns is relevant. And against 7, it's actually one of the most useful ones to know this niche for. And then as 7, this is just another long cast time cancel into parry. If you're about to die and they're going to punch you in your ult, you can just parry that. Some Shiv players will go for heavy melees after they dash through you, but like with the Mirage Tornado, this is getting a lot less common. But something that Shiv players do like to do is they will light melee you right after their ult if it doesn't kill. So if you don't die to Shiv ult, just parry. Melee Sinclair is actually one of the most common builds right now. And like with 7 stun, something to know is that Rabbit also doesn't interrupt your parry. So if you parry before the Rabbit hits you, then if they punch too early, they will get parried. Another thing that they like to do is they'll put their assistant right next to you and then charge a heavy melee and teleport to their assistant so they kind of surprise you. But if you're ready for this, this is like the easiest parry of your life, so just look out for it. Vindicta also doesn't really have anything specific to her. Viscus is actually unique because he has the only parryable ability in the game. Puddle Punch is parryable, and it's not super hard to parry during lane. If you just listen for the sound, then you can parry it almost every time. Something that a lot of Viscus players will do as well is they'll Puddle Punch under you and then go for a heavy melee. So if you parry that, you'll parry both the heavy melee and the Puddle Punch. You'll take 0 damage and you'll stun them. And this is a super common combo that Viscuses go for. And once again, this is just a more melee happy kind of character, so just be more ready for it. Another thing that Viscus players like to do is stun you with their ball and then cancel the ball and punch you. If they go for a heavy melee, this is parryable. And then as the Viscus, this is another one of those invincible iframe parries where as soon as you come out of cube, they're going to want to punch you. So if you see them winding up a melee, you can cancel it and parry. Do be aware that a lot of people are catching on to this and they are dodging the parry, but this just becomes a mind game. Viper doesn't really have any melee specific things. Against Warden, the only real melee habit that they ever have is if you get rooted by their 3, they'll sometimes melee you, but that's really it. And then as Warden, a lot of people are going to try to melee you during your ult because most Warden players just don't parry for some reason while they're ulting. So if you're in your ult, a lot of the time, if you look out for punches, you'll get more free kills. There aren't really any tips against Wraith, but as Wraith, similar to Mo, when you disarm somebody with your ult, a lot of the time they're going to punch you. So just be ready for it and you can parry them. Against Yamato, one of the most common combos that Yamato players will go for is they'll use your 2 and then they'll melee you as soon as they get to you. Another thing that a lot of Yamato players will do is use a lot of melees during their ult. And while you can't stun them during the ult, you can parry the punches and you won't take any damage. So if you see a melee coming at you during a Yamato ult, you should still parry it. Just know that they can punch you again, but you will have your parry again. As Yamato, something a lot of people forget is that while you're charging your slash, you can actually parry. This will just fire off your slash and then parry immediately. Another thing as Yamato is when you grapple somebody, a lot of the time they're going to punch you back. This is especially true against the more punchy characters, but a lot of the time if I grapple somebody like an Abrams or a Viscus, I'll just immediately parry. One of the things I don't see enough is parrying right after you pop Yamato ult. This is another one of those invincibility things where as soon as you come out of invincibility, they're going to try and punch you. So if you pop Yamato ult and then just parry out of it, if you're in front of like an Abrams, a Viscus, or anybody who really likes to punch, 80% of the time, you're going to get a parry. On Yamato, and really anybody with Unstoppable, if you punch somebody and they parry it, a lot of the time, they're going to start punching you back. And because you don't get stunned from the parry, you can just parry them back when they do that. So you really don't get punished for being parried, and you can punish them. If you made it all the way through this video, I appreciate you. Thank you. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, subscribe. I'll be posting a lot more of my guides again. I should be getting back into the groove of all that. And I stream almost every day, both on YouTube and Twitch. So come stop by, say hi. If you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer them.